Anne, and I'm here more or less on time with my February wrap-up. So February was a very good reading month. I managed 3 novels, 1 graphic memoir, and 1 kind of novel, kind of epistolary thing you'll see in a minute. And I kicked off a project which I am about to upload a video on, so keep your eye out for that. So the first book that I read in February was The Silkworm by Robert Galbraith, of course, aka J.K. Rowling. You'll probably all remember that I read The Cuckoo's Calling last year, at the very end of last year, and then it made it onto my top 10 books. I'll link that video below in case you haven't seen it. The Silkworm was an interesting one for me. It feels like it suffers a little bit from middle book syndrome. I feel a little bit about The Silkworm the way that I do about this one. Controversy time for those people who think Goblet is the best book in the series. I don't think we can be friends anymore. I felt like in this book there was one central plotline which was overshadowed by a bunch of completely unnecessary details. There were 16 million extra threads to follow which were all very coincidental. I'm looking at you, Silkworm. So I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars for a couple of reasons, despite all of my misgivings. The first one being that I listened to these on audiobook, and Robert Glenister does an absolutely amazing job of narrating everybody and keeping you in complete suspense the whole way through. The second is that I really love the relationship developments between Strike and Robin in this book. I like that he is forced to find a respect for her, and I like that she is forced to finally voice her opinions and her feelings instead of keeping them all under wraps and expecting him to know what she wants. And I like where this book sets it up for things to go. It smells like childhood in my mum's house. The next book that I read in February was an absolute hit with me, and that was Fun Home by Alison Bechdel. This is a graphic memoir telling the story of Alison's younger life with her father. All of Alison's family more or less make an appearance in this novel, and her present day self definitely makes an appearance, but we are primarily focusing on her relationship with her closeted gay father and her childhood growing up in a funeral home, which is at the beginning kind of incidental to everything, and then in the middle becomes a chief component that really makes you think about how she views life and views choices. She knows from a very early age that everything is very finite, and she sees her father's choices as more complicated based on that. And in the end, I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. A star was knocked off for me by the very last chapter. Bechdel brings together some literature in the last chapter. Books that she's associated with her father and books that she's associated with her own coming out process, and I just kind of lost interest a little bit in that last chapter, which was a shame because I felt as if that she was trying to tie something together which should have been left loose and open-ended. The next book that I read in February is a firm favourite, and it is Kate's Histories by Kate Atkinson. Kate's Histories is split into 4 separate cases which all in some way interlink and overlap. Jackson ends up with 4 really strange cases on his plate. He doesn't want any of them, and none of them make any sense. But rather than just see his investigation and his 1, 2, 3 step logic process, we see the effects of the revelations from people's points of view, and it makes for such a well-rounded novel. This time it definitely got a firm 4 out of 5. I realised when I actually read this again that I don't like Jackson very much. I like all of the other characters, but I find Jackson to be a little bit too self-pitying and a little bit whiny and indulgent. But despite that, I feel like there is so little Jackson actually present in this book that you can kind of ignore it. The next one that I read in February was one for my Agatha Christie project, and it is the next Miss Marple novel. It is The Moving Finger. So I wasn't very much a fan of the last book that I read that was a Miss Marple. I mean, The Body in Library was good. I did like it, but it wasn't a knock my socks off the way that the first two books in the Marple series were. And this novel centres around two young people who come to live in Limstock. We have one gentleman whose name I've forgotten, who was injured in a flying accident, and his sister, and he's been instructed by his doctor to move to a country town and to go somewhere where nothing ever happens and get very interested in his neighbours and do very little else until he heals. And he does that with all good intentions. I was loving this novel. I was really, really loving it. I listened to these on audiobook as well. This is definitely an audiobook month. And this one was read by Joan Hickson again. Joan Hickson is my Marple. The reason that I only gave this a 3 out of 5 is because this portion of the novel doesn't have any Miss Marple in it, which in a way is fine. I don't necessarily need a lot of Marple in my mystery. But then this portion of the novel has Marple and she solves it. Really? Marple was completely unnecessary. There was no need for her to sweep in at the end and to solve it all, and it made me feel a little bit played. And the final book that I read in February, I am so pleased that I got to, and that is 84 Charing Cross Road by Helene Hamp. I have started this so many times. This book has literally been on my shelf for 4 years, maybe 5, maybe 5. That's scary. So if you don't know anything about 84 Charing Cross Road, it is essentially about Helene Hamp, who is a novelist, I believe, but also she wrote for a lot of American TV shows for a very long time. She was an American who, during the war, started to write to a bookshop in London called Marks & Co. They were a second-hand bookshop who primarily dealt in difficult to find copies of novels. The person who primarily responds to her from Marks & Co is Frank Dole. He is a second-hand bookseller who was very specialist at the time, as he was the one who went out and bought up collections from estate sales and things like that to sell in Marks & Co. I listened to the audiobook of this one as well, quell shock. And it was narrated by John Nettles and Juliet Stevenson. John Nettles, yes, of Midsummer Murder fame. And they were perfect. They were absolutely perfect. I was hooked. Could not stop listening to them. Could not wait to get into my car to listen to them on my drive home. And they had an interview at the end of their audiobook which talked about the quality of the letters, and the letter as sort of a lost art, and the way that even though Frank is married and Helene is not really looking for a romantic relationship, the two of them did have a kind of romance, and it did bring Frank out of his very proper Englishness. But the other half of this novel, which is tiny by the way, many years after the correspondence between Frank and Helene, Helene comes to London for a very long extended trip because the book has sold and she gets an advance check, and it's her diaries of what happened in London. On one hand, I have sort of deep affection for Helene, and I really enjoyed the fact that we got to see what she really thought of London when she got here. However, what I really didn't enjoy is because it is a personal diary, so there is a lot of, not name dropping, but a lot of listing. I met with this person and then I went this place and then I thought of this and then we did this. And in between all of that, there's wonderful lines and anecdotes about Londoners and people and places and what it's like to think about a place as opposed to be in a place, and what it's like to be from a place. It's very Joan Didion in that sense. There are just some parts in it where I was like, oh, how can a dinner party last this long? So February was a great month, but it was also a bit of a weird month in terms of knocking stars off and minor disappointments and things. Hey ho, please share with me in the comments what you read in February, and if I have not seen your February wrap up yet, please link me to it and I shall duly watch it and comment so that I can add many, many more things to my endless TBR pile. Bye! Also sunshine! What's more can a pale and pasty Scottish girl want? Grissom can tell you what he wants. Grissom wants cat food, don't you? Yeah. Here. Go on. That wasn't very satisfying, was it?